It was supposed to be a quiet day. I just finished running errands and was on my way home when I decided to take the long route through my son Brian's neighborhood. I hadn't seen Lily in a while, and on impulse I thought I'd drop by to say hello. I didn't call first. I never had to. We were family after all. But as I turned onto their street, something immediately made me slow down. There, parked neatly in the driveway like it belonged there, was my husband's car, Douglas's black sedan, the one he claimed had a transmission problem and was at the mechanic's. The same car he told me wouldn't be back until the weekend. Yet there it was, right in front of Lily's house, clean and shiny as ever. At first I thought I was mistaken. I even stopped the car and stared at it for a while, expecting someone else to come out. Maybe it wasn't his. Maybe it just looked like his. But my stomach told me otherwise. I parked a little farther down the road out of sight and sat in silence for a moment. My hands were resting on the steering wheel, but they felt stiff, cold. I don't know what made me do it, but I got out and started walking slowly, carefully, like something inside me knew that whatever I was about to find wasn't going to be good. The front door was shut and the curtains were drawn, which was odd. Lily always kept the front windows open. She said she liked the sunlight. I moved around to the side of the house where the guest room window faced the small garden. That's when I heard voices. I froze. Douglas's voice came through clearly. Calm, familiar, but what caught me off guard was the tone. Too soft, too comfortable. The way you speak to someone you've grown far too used to whispering to. And then Lily's voice, low, intimate. I could barely make out the words, but it was enough. I know I shouldn't have, but he moved closer to the window. Just enough to hear better. She laughed. That sweet, nervous kind of laugh I'd only ever heard her use around Brian. But this wasn't for Brian. Then I heard Douglas say something I'll never forget. If she ever finds out it's over. I didn't breathe. Lily replied softly. She won't. She trusts you. And she wouldn't believe it even if someone told her. I felt something in my chest tighten. My ears were ringing. The kind of ringing that makes the world feel far away. Like you're watching your life from outside your body. My legs started to tremble and I reached out to steady myself on the side of the house. I don't know how long I stood there. I just remember their voices, warm, familiar, far too close. I didn't need to hear more. I had heard enough. I turned and walked away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My hands were shaking, my steps unsure. As I got back to the car, I sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, staring at nothing, trying to understand. Douglas was supposed to be out of town. Lily was supposed to be my daughter-in-law. This wasn't just a bad dream. It was real. It was happening. And I had no idea what to do. I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there trying to breathe through the storm building in my chest. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Not yet. Because deep down I knew this was just the beginning. And whatever this was, it ran deeper than I was ready for. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there beside an empty space in my bed, thinking about everything I'd heard at Lily's house. Douglas had told me he was visiting his cousin in Fairview for a few days. He even packed a bag, kissed me on the cheek, and told me not to wait up. The lie had been so smooth, so ordinary, I hadn't questioned it. After 35 years together, I thought I knew his rhythms, but now I saw it all differently. Looking back, there were signs. They'd been there for months, little moments that I had brushed aside. Douglas started keeping his phone on silent, even at home. When I asked why, he said the notifications annoyed him. Once I walked into the kitchen while he was texting, and he jolted like I'd startled him. He quickly turned the screen face down. I laughed it off at the time, thinking maybe he was planning something sweet for my birthday. But my birthday came and went, and there was nothing. He also stopped sitting next to me on the couch. We used to share a blanket while watching evening shows. He said the couch was hurting his back now and preferred the recliner. But somehow, their recliner seemed to give him more privacy than comfort. I remember one night I got up to grab tea, and when I returned, his phone screen was glowing in his palm. He quickly turned it off. There were also changes in how he looked at me, or rather how he didn't. His eyes used to be warm, curious even after all these years. But lately they were distant, cold, like he was looking through me. And it wasn't just Douglas. Lily had changed too. She used to be warm, even chatty with me. We'd bake together sometimes. She'd text me photos of Brian on business trips or ask for my opinion on furniture. I thought we had a bond. But over the past year, something shifted. She stopped inviting me over. During family dinners, she'd avoid eye contact. If I offered to help with the baby, she'd politely decline, saying, "I've got it, thanks," always with a smile. But it didn't feel like kindness. It felt like distance wrapped in politeness. And Brian, my sweet boy, he didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. He was always tired from work, always distracted. I could tell he sensed something was off at home, but he'd dismiss it. Once, when I asked him gently if everything was okay between him and Lily, he sighed and said, "It's just stress, Mom." Lily's been tense lately, that's all. But I knew better now. The pieces didn't fit before, but they were fitting now. And what they formed was something I never imagined. I sat at the dining table the next morning, staring at my cup of tea. The house felt quiet. Too quiet. I remembered how Douglas used to hum while watering the plants outside. Now the plants were drooping, neglected like everything else. My heart was heavy, but my mind was beginning to clear. This wasn't just a mistake or a one-time betrayal. No, this had been growing behind my back like a weed, carefully hidden, watered with lies. What hurt the most wasn't the affair. It was the layers of trust that had been peeled away quietly while I went on believing we were still a family. I had loved Douglas since I was 24. We built a life together, a home. We raised Brian with love and discipline. We survived tight budgets, hospital scares, and job losses. I thought we were unbreakable. But now I wondered, had I been the only one holding it all together? I placed my hand gently over the worn dining table. Douglas had built it himself in our first year of marriage. Each scratch on it had a story. I used to see love in the imperfections. Now all I saw were reminders of how far we'd drifted. I didn't cry, not yet. But something inside me had shifted. I could feel it. This wasn't a situation I could ignore. It wasn't a phase. It was a storm, and I had just stepped into the eye of it, and somehow I knew if I started digging, I wouldn't like what I found. But I also knew I couldn't stop myself. I don't know what gave me the strength to return to Lily's house the next day. I told myself I needed clarity, closure, anything to make sense of what I had heard. A part of me still clung to the hope that maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it was all a horrible mistake. But deep down, I knew the truth had already begun to take root in my bones. I waited until late afternoon when I knew Brian would still be at work. I parked a little farther away this time where no one would think twice about my car. I wore a plain jacket and tied my hair back and silly really like I was trying not to be noticed by my own family. I crept through the side path again, the same way I had the day before. The garden was quiet, but the blinds in the guest room were slightly ajar. That was new. I crouched beside the window, careful not to make a sound, and leaned in. I heard Douglas first. His voice was lower this time, slower, like he was thinking between words. "He has no idea. I stayed last night just to be sure." Then Lily's voice, almost whispering, followed. "You shouldn't have gone back to her at all." My heart thudded. Her, she meant me. Douglas sighed. I had to. She was asking questions. She's suspicious. Then lie better. Lily snapped, her tone sharp. The more she pokes around, the closer she gets. And I'm not risking everything because you got sloppy. There was a pause. Silence thick enough to drown in. Douglas spoke again, but this time with a softness that twisted my stomach. "You know I'd choose you." I flinched. "Don't say things you don't mean," Lily said. "We've come too far. You need to fix this before she finds out about." She stopped. There was a loud clink. Maybe a cup sat down on the table and then the sound of movement. He leaned back from the window just slightly, my breath shallow. My legs were beginning to ache, but I didn't dare shift. Fix what? Before I could even process it, Douglas chuckled. That familiar, easy laugh he used to use with me. The same one that used to make me feel like everything was fine. "She's not as sharp as she used to be," he said. "Trust me, she won't figure this out." I closed my eyes. He wasn't talking about a stranger. He was talking about me. I stayed crouched for a few minutes longer, afraid to move. Their voices dropped again, but I couldn't make out the rest. I didn't need to. The damage was done. There was no room left for doubt. I rose slowly, my knees stiff from kneeling. My palms were cold, damp from gripping the window ledge. Every step I took away from that house felt like 1,000 lbs of weight pressing on my chest. My thoughts were spinning. How long had this been going on? When did Lily become this person? And how had Douglas, the man who once carried me across the threshold of our first home, become so unrecognizable? I reached the sidewalk and took one last look at the house. I remembered when Brian and Lily first bought it. Douglas and I had helped paint the nursery. We'd brought over casseroles and wine. I'd sat in that porch and rocked my granddaughter to sleep. And now I couldn't bear to look at it. It got in the car and sat still for a long while, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. My knuckles were pale. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older, sadder, like someone I barely recognized. Something sacred had been broken. Not just my marriage, not just trust, but something deeper. And the worst part was knowing they weren't sorry. They weren't hiding because they felt guilt. They were hiding because they still had something to protect. Whatever it was, I was going to find it. But I wasn't going to rush. I was done being the one who asked nicely, who waited to be told the truth. From now on, I would look for it myself. When I got home that evening, the house felt colder than usual. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was the silence, that thick, heavy kind of silence that settles when something in your life has shifted, and you don't yet know how to exist inside it. I didn't cook dinner. I didn't clean. I didn't bother changing out of my coat. I walked straight to the study. Douglas hadn't used that room much lately, not since retirement, but he still kept a few things in there. An old drawer chest, some papers, files. He'd always been possessive of his desk. It was the one place I never touched. Out of respect, out of trust, but tonight I opened every drawer. At first it was all junk. Old receipts, paper clips, a cracked stapler. But then I saw it tucked beneath a pile of tax forms inside a thin manila folder, a small black cell phone, one I'd never seen before. I held it in my hand for a long time. It was cold. The kind of cold that felt unnatural, like it had been hidden a long time. I pressed the power button and the screen lit up. No password. What I found on that phone changed everything. Dozens of messages, all from a single contact. Lily, same time tomorrow. I missed you today. Don't forget the envelope. Photos. Some of them blurry, others too clear. There were texts going back almost a year. My heart pounded as I scrolled. Their language wasn't always romantic, and most of it was practical, planned, coordinated. But that made it worse. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake. This was something they had structured, protected. Then, just as I was about to put the phone down, one message stopped me. It was dated 6 months ago, just a few weeks after Lily gave birth to her second child. He still doesn't suspect the baby is Innes. I told him the timing was early and he believed me. Thank God he looks enough like Brian. I read it twice, 3 times. I nearly dropped the phone. The baby, Brian's daughter, my granddaughter. Lily was saying she wasn't Brian's. No, 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 no. Miss Domack turned. The walls around me seemed to pulse. The message wasn't a misunderstanding. There was no ambiguity. Lily had admitted it. Not just the affair, but the lie that stretched deeper than any I'd imagined. She had passed off Douglas's child as Brian's. I felt like I was going to be sick. My hand covered my mouth as I lowered myself onto the floor, the phone still glowing in my palm. How could she? How could he? Did Douglas know? Of course he did. That's why he kept this phone. That's why they were whispering about fixing things. This was bigger than Ivor expected. It wasn't just betrayal. It was deceit rooted into the heart of our family. And the worst part, Brian had no idea. He adored that baby, had called her his miracle girl. I remembered the way he held her the first time, tears streaming down his cheeks. How he looked at Lily with pure love, so sure he was standing beside the woman who completed his life. And all along she was lying to his face. I sat there in the study, still holding the phone, unable to move. My mind kept circling the same question over and over. Why? What did they want? What were they gaining from this? I had no answers yet, but I knew this. I couldn't let this continue. Brian deserved to know. My family deserved better than this rotten shell we were all living in. But I had to be careful. I couldn't go storming in with accusations. Not yet. They were hiding this for a reason. That meant there was more. More secrets, more lies. And if I wanted to tear it all down, I needed to be smart because once I started unraveling this thread, I wouldn't stop until everything that was exposed was. The morning after I found the phone, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a notebook. I needed to keep track. Dates, messages, details. My mind was too full and I didn't want to forget anything. Every time I replayed that message about the baby not being Brian's, I felt my hands tighten around the pen. I kept telling myself this couldn't get worse, but something in my gut said it could. That same morning, I called Linda. Linda and I had been friends since we were both young mothers. She'd once worked ASA paralegal and had connections in town. Most people knew her for her quiet smile and sharp mind. What most didn't know was that Linda never forgot a thing. If anyone could help me quietly look into Douglas's recent behavior, legally or otherwise, it was her. We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town where nobody knew our names. I slid the burner phone across the table, already unlocked. She scrolled through it quietly, eyebrows rising higher the further she went. When she finished, she looked up and said gently, "Grace, you need to prepare yourself. There's no way this ends neatly." "I know," I whispered. "But I have to protect Brian. He doesn't know anything." Linda nodded and made a few calls. She didn't ask too many questions, just said she'd dig into Douglas's financial records, asset transfers, and anything unusual in the last couple of years. What she found made my blood run cold. Days later, we met again. She slid a manila envelope toward me. Inside were copies of property documents and a quiet paper trail that showed Douglas had been transferring small sums of money every few months to a private account, one I never knew existed. But that wasn't all. "Grace," Linda said, tapping one of the documents, "I think he's been funding Lily directly." "What?" My voice cracked. "This account?" She pointed again. "Is in her name. Set up just last year. And several of the deposits line up exactly with dates from the texts you showed me." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Douglas wasn't just cheating on me. He was supporting Lily behind our backs. Money we'd saved, funds we'd built together over a lifetime, retirement accounts, all funneled to the woman married to our son. But Linda wasn't done. "There's something else," she said slowly. "I found an old hospital billing code tied to Douglas from about 35 years ago. It's marked as a private DNA consultation." I froze. "What are you saying?" She looked at me gently. "Grace, I think Douglas may have requested a paternity test on Brian back when he was born." My hand went to my chest. No, that's not possible. Brian is his." "I'm not saying he isn't," she replied carefully. "But Douglas had doubts at some point. That's why he ran the test." I couldn't breathe. Douglas never told me he questioned Brian's paternity. We were married together. We never had a separation. There was never another man unless it was projection, unless he was the one with secrets back then, and he thought I might have had one too. How long had he been living with that suspicion? And why would he keep it a secret if the results confirmed Brian was his? Unless the results didn't, I felt dizzy. Everything I thought I knew was unraveling. My husband might not be Brian's father, and now he'd fathered a child with Brian's wife. It was like history repeating itself. Only this time it was a betrayal I had no part in. I looked at Linda, my voice shaking. "Can you find out the result of that test?" She nodded slowly. "I'll try. No promises. It's old, but I'll look." I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my hands from trembling. I had walked into this thinking I was uncovering one lie, an affair. But now I was tangled in something much darker, something generational. A web of secrets that stretched backward as much as it did forward. I didn't know where it ended, but I knew this. I was going to keep going because whatever truth had been buried in this family, I was going to dig it up. I felt like I was walking through a dream. Not the kind you wake from sweaty and relieved, but the kind that follows you hour after hour, like a shadow you can't shake. Even after Linda confirmed the hospital record was old and unrelated, just a routine checkup, and assured me Brian was Douglas's son, the weight in my chest didn't lift. If anything, it grew heavier because it meant Douglas had no excuse, no strange confusion from the past, no trauma to fall back on, just choice. He had chosen to betray his son. He had chosen to build something twisted with Lily and lie to us all. And the baby, the child that Brian tucked in every night, sang lullabies to called my angel. That baby wasn't his. I stared at the ceiling for most of that week. I didn't eat much. I didn't call Douglas. He still thought I was unaware. He still kissed me on the cheek each morning and mumbled something about golf or errands or needing air. Fine, let him lie. Because I was planning. Not yet. He wouldn't believe it without proof, and I refused to speak without evidence. I wanted them to hear it together, to look each other in the eye when the truth came out. So I invited everyone to dinner. I sent a group text to Douglas, Brian, and Lily. Simple and warm. Sunday dinner at 60, family night. Been too long? Lily responded first. Sounds lovely, Grace. I'll bring dessert. Douglas followed with a thumbs-up emoji. Brian took longer. Finally, he replied, Sure, Mom, I'll make it. I cleaned the house the day before, not because I needed to impress them, but because I needed to feel in control. I arranged the table, made space near the wall where I could hide a small phone already set to record. I tested the placement 3 times to make sure it picked up every voice from every chair. Then I cooked roast chicken, potatoes with rosemary, the exact meal I used to make on Sundays when Brian was a teenager. I wanted this dinner to feel familiar, comfortable, like nothing had changed, because that's how people talk when they feel safe. When Sunday came, I set the table with the good plates, the ones we got on our 25th anniversary. I wore Douglas's favorite color, a soft blue dress I hadn't put on in years. My hands were steady, my voice calm. Douglas arrived first, arms full of wine. He kissed my cheek like everything was normal. I smiled back, hiding the chill beneath my skin. Lily came in next, holding the baby on her hip and a tray of chocolate tarts in her other hand. She greeted me like a daughter, even leaned in and whispered, You look beautiful tonight. I nearly laughed. Brian came last. He looked tired but happy. He kissed the baby, ruffled her hair, and gave me a hug that lingered longer than usual. Smells amazing, Mom, he said. Thanks for doing this. Of course, I smiled. Family always comes first. Dinner started slow, easy. Brian talked about work. Lily chimed in with stories about the baby. Douglas poured wine, cracked a few old jokes. I responded like nothing was wrong. I asked questions. I laughed in the right places. I served food and topped off glasses. But every time Lily leaned toward Douglas, every time their eyes met across the table, I watched. And every moment the phone hidden behind the fruit bowl kept recording. Every word, every slip, every careful glance. I didn't need them to confess. I just needed their body language, their familiarity, the small casual interactions that when viewed later, with the truth known, would speak louder than any message or call. When dessert was served, I looked around at the faces of the people I once called my world. One man I had loved for 35 years, one daughter-in-law I welcomed like my own, and my son, my sweet, loyal son, caught in a nightmare he didn't even see coming. I sat back and said softly, You know, I've been thinking a lot about family secrets lately. Douglas looked up, a faint flicker of tension crossing his face. Lily's fork paused midair. Brian blinked. What do you mean? I smiled. Oh, nothing, I said. Let's just enjoy the evening. But in my mind, I knew. The next dinner wouldn't be so quiet. The night after the dinner, I sat alone at the dining table, phone in hand, listening to their courting. Every detail I'd hoped for was there. The looks between Douglas and Lily, the subtle comments, the slip-ups. They were careful, yes, but not careful enough. I watched the video I secretly took from the sideboard. Body language doesn't lie. Lily touched Douglas's hand too easily. He leaned into her laugh like it was a habit. And when I mentioned family secrets, their faces changed, tightened. There was guilt in Lily's smile and fear in Douglas's eyes. It was enough. Enough to prove that I wasn't crazy. Enough to show Brian. The next morning, I asked him to come over, just him. I told him I needed help moving some boxes in the garage. He didn't question it. When he arrived, it tried to act normal, but I could barely look him in the eye. He was my son, my only child, and what I was about to show him would shatter him. "Mom," he asked, wiping his hands after moving the last box. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath and handed him the phone. "Sit down and watch this, please." He frowned but obeyed. I sat beside him, silent as the dinner footage played. At first, he didn't understand what he was watching, but then he saw the way Lily touched Douglas's hand, how they smiled at each other, how Douglas looked at her when no one was watching. Brian leaned forward. When the recording shifted to the audio clips from the burner phone, the ones with Lily saying he still thinks the baby is his, he froze. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared at the floor for a long time after it ended. Finally, he whispered, "Are you saying?" I nodded. "Yes, Lily and your father. The baby, she isn't yours." He shot up from the chair and took 2 steps back, breathing heavily. No, that's not possible. Lily would never." "She did," I said gently. "I'm sorry, Brian. I didn't want this for you, but you needed to know." He didn't say anything, just stood there, fists clenched, breathing like he'd run a mile. I wanted to hold him like I did when he was a boy, but I knew he wouldn't let me. "Not right now. I need proof," he said at last. "More than this." "I already filed for a paternity test," I replied quietly. "Privately. It's coming back tomorrow." He nodded slowly, still dazed. "Okay." The next evening we sat together again, this time, waiting for the call from the private lab. When it came, Brian answered with trembling hands. Their results were clear. 0% probability of paternity. Brian didn't speak. He simply lowered the phone, closed his eyes, and let out a long, quiet breath. Then he stood up, picked up his keys, and walked out the door. I didn't follow. He needed space, and it trusted he knew what to do. I don't know exactly what happened when Brian arrived at his house. I only know what he told me later. He walked in, held the baby for a long time, then gently placed her in her crib. He turned to Lily and said one word, "Why?" She tried to deny it at first, then she cried. Then she begged, but Brian was already gone. He called me from his car that night and asked if he could stay with me for a while. I told him yes, of course, always. As for Douglas, he came home late, drunk and stumbling. He must have heard. Maybe Lily called him in a panic. He tried to talk to me, but I said nothing. Just handed him an envelope, divorce papers. He laughed at first, said I was being emotional, but I wasn't. I was done. The next morning, I sent the video and test results to a lawyer, and then to Lily's parents, her job, her friends, every person she'd used to parade her perfect family life to. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. And when it came out, it landed like a bomb. Douglas moved out 2 days later. Lily lost everything. Her marriage, her reputation, her support. And Brian, he's healing slowly. He's still here with me, and he's still hurting.